I'm going to read chapter 4 and 5 out of my novel, Riapoke. And for those of you just getting on now, you can actually find in my videos and on my Facebook page or on my YouTube page, you can see where I'm reading chapters 1 through 3. So again, I'm going to read 4 and 5 today, depending on how this goes. I will. Oh, hey Dennis, I see you're on now. If there's a lot of comments, I had some really good viewers last time. I think the viewer count was up to like 60 some odd people, so there was a lot of people, which was a really good response. So I'll keep doing it as long as I have viewers, and maybe as long as we're under quarantine. Who knows? Alrighty, so let me find chapter 3. That's too far. Anyway, I hope everybody's doing well under quarantine. I'm about ready to lose my mind, and I'm hoping this ends sooner rather than later. Chapter 4. Still Waters Run Deep. Waylon Anderson took a few more sips from his flask before reaching the Riapoke Municipal boat ramp. The warmth of the whiskey helped shield his nerves and replenish his courage. Nothing like that was ever supposed to happen. Asked about it in a local meeting one day, they said, Lake Oleander never exposed its dead, and never would. Today, it did just that. One moment the sun cascaded down from the cloudless sky, radiating off the placid lake on a perfect day. Now the situation completely changed. Something terrible happened on Lake Oleander, and by extension, the tiny town of Riapoke. Approaching the boat ramp, he saw the normal cast of characters hanging out. A couple of boys fished from the docks, as well as a couple of old men. A husband and wife, trying to launch a boat from a larger ramp, argued about the proper technique. Jack Snow, the local boat mechanic, was fixing someone's impeller in the parking lot. Matthew Tanner, the regional conservation officer and friend of Waylon, stood guard over it all. Waylon and Matthew were both in their 30s. Matthew took better care of himself than Waylon, though, giving him a muscular build and the appearance of only being in his mid-20s. With light brown hair and hazel eyes, Waylon always wondered why his friend never settled down and married. Lake Oleander was Matthew's favorite base of operations since moving back to Riapoke. Matthew stepped forward and eyed Waylon with suspicion. Even on his worst day, Waylon handled any boat as an extension of his own body. In contrast to the usual ease and familiarity of a man whose life was spent on the water, the boat's aluminum hull bounced off the recycled composite decking with a deafening boom. Waylon could barely tie off the boat, slipping while stepping onto the dock and almost headbutting Matthew as he tried to regain his balance. "What the hell is the matter with you, Waylon?" Matthew said, offering a hand up to the deck. Waylon waved the officer off. "I need to speak with Donnie." He lurched forward and grabbed onto the officer's arm for stability. "Phew, Waylon, what the hell are you doing? I should arrest you for drinking while operating a boat. You're drunker than a $5 hooker in Singapore." Waylon stood to his full height, 4 inches taller than Matthew. "Go ahead and arrest me. I'll be safer in a cell than out here." Waylon pointed over his shoulder at Lake Oleander. Okay. Just tell me you ain't driving anywhere. We'll have someone put your boat on a trailer and you can pick it up tomorrow. Stay out of your truck or I'll have to arrest you." "Oh, don't worry about me. You're driving us. We need to talk to Donnie right away." Matthew replaced the annoyed look on his face with one of genuine concern. Something uncharacteristically worried his most unflappable friend. "Waylon, what's this all about? Have you seen a ghost or something? You're kind of scaring me a little. I don't think I've ever seen you like this." "Just drive and I'll tell you about it." Matthew climbed behind the wheel of the squad truck while Waylon slumped in the passenger seat and took out his flask and threw back another sip. "Waylon, you can't do that in here. You know that. Will you tell me what this is? What has you so rattled?" Waylon glanced out the window at nothing and shook his head. Matthew and Waylon attended the same elementary schools together. They had been very close friends as kids. In high school, however, they separated into different cliques. Waylon went to hang out with the jocks of the school, and Matthew became interested in law enforcement. As a result, the two grew apart. When Matthew moved back to the area, they were able to rekindle their friendship. In spite of running in different circles, Waylon still confided in Matthew and never feared his judgment. "Matt, out there in the lake, I was just casting. Out by the bend. The big bass stump out there. Just casting. Hoping something would bite, like I've done, I don't know, hundreds of times." "Okay, so what? You saw the biggest monster bass of your life. The thing had fangs, fur, and hit the surface singing Sinatra tunes?" Tears streamed down Waylon's face. "Saw a head, Matt. Fucking head. That guy, the hiker that came through here a few weeks with that girl. I think his name was Carl Johnson or something." Matthew slammed on the brakes, causing Waylon to lurch forward in his seat as the sound of screeching tires filled his ears. Matthew pulled the truck over to the side of the road. His complexion drained of color, taking on a gray pallor. The implication of what Waylon said wasn't lost on him. "You mean Carl Jensen? Are you telling me that you saw the head of Carl Jensen in the lake today? Do you even realize what you're saying, Waylon? Holy shit!" The two men sat in silence for about a minute. Waylon reached over and handed his friend the flask of whiskey. Wordlessly, Matthew took a long drink. They sat there for a few moments or more, staring at the open road. Past the turnoff, which took people back to the main part of town, toward the church, a few boarded-up businesses, they'd merge with the highway. Both men shared the same thought. How far could they make it down the road before anyone noticed? From there, the road would take them to Richmond, Washington, D.C., or even Pittsburgh or Philadelphia. It might just be possible to outrun a shitstorm likely on the horizon for the little town. "We need to go see Donnie," Matthew said. Hitting the accelerator, he flipped on the emergency lights. Bad news never got better with age, and this news was as bad as it ever got. You grab a sip of tea. Donnie Swenson sat back on his thick leather couch with a book and a nice cup of tea. Nice cup of tea? I've got a cup of tea. Look at that. A lovely evening to sit by the window and watch the rainstorm play with the trees and form puddles in the driveway. Under normal circumstances, he'd be at church, watching over a staff and answering phone calls. This rare, relaxing day off hit the mark. In the distance, a flock of geese flew lazily over the horizon. He thought about how majestically the birds flew as they headed off to parts unknown. The way they maintained a V-shaped pattern across the sky suggested order in a disorderly world. Like an arrowhead without a shaft released from an archer's bow. That was the right word. Order. Exactly the way he liked his town, the town of Riapoke. The estate inherited from his parents crouched in the dead center of 250 acres of forest. All the homes on this side of town did. The home and property, if sold, would be valued at $5 million or more. However, since moving into his parents' home in Riapoke, life became far easier. The advantages the town fell over themselves to provide made up for the difficulties of living in a more rural life. 10 years ago, if anyone suggested he'd come to pretty much own the town, he'd think them nuts. His 16-year-old daughter, Beth, strolled through the house. Having found the tennis racket she'd misplaced, her current search involved a missing pair of tennis shoes. "Daddy, have you seen my shoes?" Shaking his head at her quest. "No, darling. You'd know if you put them away where they belonged." She huffed at his well-rehearsed line. "Oh, Daddy, you know I love you, but take it from me, that line needs to find a good retirement home." He knew where they were. However, finding them for her wouldn't teach the headstrong teenager to put things back where they belonged. Beth needed to learn how to take on more responsibility. As heiress to the inherited and sometimes newly accumulated fortune, I meant to read, as the heiress to an inherited and some newly acquired fortune, she'd learn responsibility if it killed him. Beth meant everything to him. She grew into the spitting image of her mother, who left him after he assumed the role of reverend at the church. She lacked his vision for the town and didn't believe in what he and the master were trying to achieve. One night she slipped out and never returned. The master selected a new wife for him, a mousy woman named Helen, who fulfilled the role as well as anyone could. They married in a small ceremony at the church, and although they had although they never had an emotional connection, his new wife fulfilled his needs and helped raise Beth until Helen died from an unforeseen illness a few years ago. As a child, his German parents insisted everything in life be planned and regulated. This suited Donnie well. Dinner served promptly at 6, and God help you if you came home late. Shoes were on for school at exactly 7:15, not 7:14, not 7:16. Some called them control freaks. However, the beauty and order gave his life meaning. Strict controls were part of his upbringing. He relished and stuck to them. Days off never promised relaxation. Most of the time he spent walking in circles looking for something to do. His daughter eventually became irritated and sent Donnie out to take a long walk, if only to give her and the house staff a few moments of peace. In the distance, flashes of light pierced the canopy of trees with beams of red and blue. Donnie never remembered Matthew ever driving his truck up the driveway with the emergency lights on. What does that idiot want? Donnie examined his cup of tea for answers. Through careful and creative planning and, of course, the master's help, Donnie managed to force all the actual law enforcement officers out of the town soon after relocating to Riapoke. With a fictitious police department on the books, Donnie managed a good stage show, and officials from other parts of the state needed to pry into their business. Several trusted town people filled out the ranks of the non-existent sheriff and deputies when it became necessary. For the past 8 years, Matthew had functioned as their one and only legitimate law enforcement official. Matthew, a handful at times, was prone to indulging his independent streak. A native son, he insisted on doing things by the book, where the lives of the residents were concerned. Until recently, he'd been trustworthy. A few details came to light which gave Donnie second thoughts. Getting rid of Matthew would be a difficult task. Matthew had the confidence and trust of the townspeople, and could challenge Donnie's authority if he grew a backbone. Donnie watched the lights shine brighter and brighter until they threatened to give him a headache. The truck pulled up in front of the house. Flinging open the door, he glared down at the man who dared intrude on his peaceful day. From the truck, he was shocked to see that in addition to Matthew Tanner, Waylon Anderson also stumbled out, almost falling to the ground. "Matthew, turn them damn lights off!" Donnie bellowed. He seemed to disregard the order, waving Donnie off as he approached the stairs leading up to the main house. "Damn it, Tanner, turn off those fucking lights now!" Donnie didn't like to be ignored. Matthew, looking annoyed, returned to the truck and flipped a switch, dousing the emergency lights. "What do you mean coming to my home with those lights on?" "Donnie, we ain't here for tea," Waylon answered. "We got business and it's important." Donnie let out an annoyed sigh. "You better be right." Waylon had committed himself to the cause and proved a useful tool to Donnie. Waylon worked for the approval of Donnie and the master. The master loved servants like Waylon, never needing any cajoling or prompting, a good follower who did what he was told like an obedient dog. "Well, let's get on with it. This is my day off, and I have no intention of wasting it talking to you two." "We need to talk inside," Matthew said. Donnie glared at Matthew like he'd glare at an insolent student who disobeyed his teacher. "We'll talk whenever and wherever I decide we will talk, Tanner. You have no right to speak to me You have no right to speak that way to your better. Remember your place." Matthew stiffened and took a step toward Donnie, who stepped back a few paces. "Donnie, we either talk inside in your office or I'll arrest you for interfering in a police investigation. Then we can talk in my office, which is far less comfortable." Donnie waved his hand in front of his nose in an attempt to diffuse the tense situation and hide his own fear. "Jesus, Tanner, what have you been drinking?" Donnie knew he owned Matthew. However, on the books, Donnie's only official capacity was the town's reverend and mayor. Matthew, in theory, had the power to arrest him. "Yes, we both have," Waylon offered. "After we're done talking, you'll do right to have a few snorts yourself." Donnie fumed at the lack of respect. He wasn't sure how to handle it. "Suit yourself, boys. Step inside, and you can explain the liquor on your breaths. And you, Matthew, drinking on duty." In no mood to carry on a lengthy discussion, About his commitment to ethics, Matthew pointed to the house. Your office now. Once again, he succeeded in intimidating Donnie. Not something Donnie particularly liked, preferring to be the primary force in the room. As you wish, Tanner. This had better be good. You're treading on thin ice today. They proceeded through a marble entryway and walked down a dark paneled hallway. At the end, a set of double oak doors stood imposing and heavy. The Swenson family crest, carved into the wood, intimidated all visitors to the space. It was an audacious thing, a shield with 2 falcons entwined in battle. Next to each bird, 2 swords crossed. The family motto was emblazoned on the bottom of the shield in a scroll. Authority, not truth, makes law. Donnie pushed open the doors. Long pieces of finely polished wood flooring gave way to several oriental rugs, a large desk, and 3 chairs. Matthew and Waylon took seats as Donnie closed and locked the wooden doors. Stand up, the both of you. You come into my home flashing lights all over creation like a bunch of idiots. You both smell of liquor, and Tanner, you asshole, ordering me around in my own house. Need I remind you your place here? Give me one good reason why I shouldn't turn you over to the master right now. Waylon shot out of the chair in response to the rebuke, fear in his eyes. Matthew got up more slowly and put his hands down flat on Donnie's desk. Leaning toward the Reverend, Matthew stared into Donnie's eyes with a steely glare which left no doubt he wasn't in the mood for wordplay. Waylon fished Carl Jensen's head out of the lake today, Matthew said. For a moment, no one spoke. The 3 men just stared at one another. Donnie's mouth fell open like a man caught mid-word and failed to carry out its pronunciation to the end. The color drained from his face. After a lengthy and awkward silence, Donnie turned to a large globe next to the desk. Flipping open the secret compartment and retrieving 3 glasses, he filled them with bourbon. Placing 2 glasses in front of the men, he fell into his leather chair behind the desk. You 2 better sit down and have a drink. That was chapter 4, by the way. Let me have another sip of tea. Chapter 5. Sets her heart aflutter. Megan questioned if they were lost at the precise moment assigned for the Hideaway Resort and Convention Center fell into the beam of the car's headlights. According to the sign, only a few scant miles of the road lay between them and a good night's sleep. The prospect of rest excited her. Kyle even let out a yawn or 2 escape before succumbing to the exhaustion of the drive and the epic amount of food he'd consumed at dinner. Pulling into the reception center's visitor parking area, eager to get their room assignment, she left Kyle sleeping in the car. Good evening and welcome to the Hideaway, a perky girl behind the counter said, flashing a set of perfect pearl white teeth. I'm Kimberly, and it's my pleasure to help you. May I have your name, please? The enthusiastically annoying girl struck Megan as one of those people whose highest aspirations in life peaked at professional cheerleader. Blonde to a fault, expressionless eyes gave her the impression the light was still on with no one at home. She couldn't be more than a year or 2 older than Kyle. Megan Johnston, and we got in on a last-minute cancellation? Megan flipped through a pile of paperwork sitting on the registration desk. Ah, here we go, Johnston, right. I see there are 2 in your party. Where is Mr. Johnston? Megan made a face. Oh, no, not like that. Kyle Johnston is my son. He's sleeping in the car. The girl stared at Megan with obvious disapproval at the idea of leaving a sleeping infant in the car. Do you need a crib or anything? No, young lady. My son is 17. He'd never fit. Just the keys, please. We're both exhausted. Megan looked at least 10 years younger than most women with a 17-year-old son, so people assumed Kyle was a baby. However, the girl behind the registration desk struck her as particularly dim-witted. Oh, I'm sorry. Is he cute? Megan needed a second to process the question that the girl just asked. I'm his mother. For your sake, I'll forget you said that. Oblivious to her faux pas, Kimberly just shrugged, flashed her perfect set of teeth, and said, Okay, your room is on the second level near the elevators. We have a complimentary full breakfast at 6:30, which runs till 10. You can also reserve a boat if you want, either for the full day or half a day. Just don't tie up at Riapoke docks, though. They don't like strangers. They're kind of odd like that. You're the second person who's told me that today, Megan mused, more to herself than Kimberly. Well, okay, can I reserve a small boat with an outboard for the day after tomorrow? Absolutely, I'll reserve one now, and you can head to the docks in the morning. Do you want it all day or just for the morning? I'll take it all day. Megan picked up the room keys and turned to leave. Have a good night, Mrs. Johnston. Good night, Kimberly. The girl smiled at Megan. Perhaps Kimberly just sounded dim-witted through the pallor of exhaustion and the long drive. When she reached the car, Kyle woke up from his extended nap. Hey, buddy, rested and ready to take on the world, she teased. He stretched his long frame and let out a prolonged yawn. Rested and ready to go back to sleep? We have our room. I don't think they realize that they're going to go broke with you eating the complimentary breakfast. They parked the car and dragged their luggage back to the entrance. Walking into the reception area, Kimberly stood behind the counter as before, this time with two other females who had joined her. They giggled and turned toward each other, whispering in hushed voices like this was the hallway of a high school. Oh, God, I hope I was never that stupid as a teenager, Megan thought. Kyle, not so innocently, flashed them a smile, and the three melted in response. Hello, ladies, he said, adopting his manliest stride. He approached the giggling trio, but Megan caught his arm. Not now, Romeo. It's late, and we have a lot of fun things planned tomorrow. You can schmooze the ladies another time. Good night, girls. Megan shot them a dirty look as she scooted him away from the counter. Bit of a killjoy, don't you think? Kyle said. I just wanted to get a name or two, and maybe phone numbers. Megan growled at him, not raising Kyle as a piece of meat for wandering eyes. He seemed to enjoy the attention a little too much. The situation reminded her of her own teenage years. Every boy with wispy hair and a cute smile turned her head, too. It was too early for Kyle to make girls' heads turn. Or maybe she tried to mask the fear that her little boy was growing up faster than she imagined. Just one more summer. Let me have my little boy for just one more summer. The next morning, the day seemed full of possibilities. After a long breakfast of more food than she thought even her son could eat, they took a long walk, just mom and son. The woods along the lake shore held a magical allure. They both talked of what life at the university would be like and what lay in store for him. He would be off to college soon enough, and for Megan it all happened too quickly. For the first time she spoke to him as an adult, and he spoke to her as one as well, not as a child seeking his mother's approval. Sunshine and warm air invigorated her. Megan walked in silence for a short while, thinking over everything that happened to them in life. Right now, everything aligned for just this once. After a couple of hours in the woods, they returned to the resort and changed into swim gear. The beach area lay out before them, a long stretch of sand bookended by woods on one end and a small resort harbor on the other. A generous swimming area extended into the lake, cordoned off with red and white ropes and floats letting you know how far out you were allowed to swim. It was inevitable that either Kyle would find girls or they would find him. The second the two of them stepped out of the hotel proper, the girls flocked to Kyle. He'd been polite, gently putting them off while he walked beside his mother. Megan sighed to herself at the thought of pretty young girls peeling her little boy away from her side. At least they'd hiked together that morning. It occurred to Megan that kids always grow up too fast in a parent's eye, no matter how old they are. She wished Kyle could stay a scared little boy who always insisted on having the closets opened, and for her to chase away the lobsters who hid under the bed. She laughed to herself as she remembered the time he got the words lobsters and monsters mixed up, and it stuck. Mom, can I ask you something? Megan sighed at him. Tired of your old mother already, huh? Mom, you're not old, and I'm not tired of you, but... His voice drifted off. I'm not cool enough? Trying to recover, he said, No way, you're plenty cool. She shook her head. Go ahead, Romeo. Go find your Juliet and leave me to die on the beach. All alone. Okay, you're being a tad dramatic, Mom, aren't you? He said, smirking. Megan waved toward the beach. Have fun, sweetie. Just be back home, or just be back in time for dinner. I have a table reserved, and we're going to do it up right tonight. I will. I promise. Be back at 6. I love you, Mom. Love you too, son. Kyle trotted off across the sand to a group of teens standing near the water's edge. While unsure what kind of trouble a group of teenagers could find at a resort like this, Kyle had always shown good judgment. Though their life had been difficult, he developed a good head and a strong sense of right and wrong. However, she wondered how well his level head would stand up against a girl at the water's edge, wearing a bikini more at home at a strip club than on a beach at a family-friendly resort. You can't keep them small forever. I guess you have to let them go sooner or later, Megan said out loud to herself. I'm sorry, what? A voice asked. Did you say something? Megan shielded her eyes, glancing up to see a man standing next to her. He looked straight out of a cologne commercial. Bermuda shorts, unbuttoned Hawaiian shirt, and a drink with an umbrella in it. Nowhere near the caliber of man she would consort with on a beach. She'd always prided herself on good looks and taking care of herself, but this guy fell into a whole other league. Oh, I'm sorry. My son over there, he has abandoned me to play with his new friends, and by new friends I mean that bikini over there. He laughed at her exasperated tone. Well, that's okay. The bikini you just gave the stink eye to is my daughter, Kelly. Don't worry, he's in good hands. She's probably already planning their nuptials and naming our grandchildren. Megan felt the flush of embarrassment redden her cheeks. Megan launched into damage control mode. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend. I'm sure she's lovely. It's just that one second they're running around the yard naked with a diaper on their heads, and the next moment they're full-grown people with hormones in their own lives. He chuckled. Oh, don't worry yourself. To be fair, I gave your son a similar look. Megan laughed as well. Since we're going to be in-laws by the end of the week, I should introduce myself. Megan Johnston, and your new son-in-law is Kyle. He flashed a quirky smile, which she instantly found endearing. Well, is this seat taken? I mean, for your husband? He gestured to the chair reserved for Kyle. Nope, but it's only one and no room for your, wife? Girlfriend? They both stared at each other in silence for a moment before bursting out into peals of laughter. Wow, we suck at this, Megan blurted out. The man shook his head and smiled. Is it that obvious? I swear I was much better at this sort of thing in my younger days. Well, let's avoid the awkwardness and we'll cut right to the end of the conversation. I'm Mike Chase, and there is no wife or girlfriend. She motioned to the chair. Ah, so, you were a member of the Jilted Spouses Club of Divorcees International, then? He sat after adjusting the back. Actually, his voice took on a somber tone, widower. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound so, well, bitter. He brightened up a little. No problem. It was 5 years ago. Never smoked a day in her life, and my wife dies of lung cancer. A tough few years. We're getting there, though. Kelly and I are treating ourselves to this weekend, a little daddy-daughter time before she blasts off to university. And Kyle and I are doing this same sort of thing. I get on the resort's discount cancellation list. They called me up to offer me this week. It's actually a pretty good deal. You should look into it. It's the only way I can afford this weekend and still feed Kyle. He readjusted the back of the chair. Well, we just took off on a whim. It's hard to see a little girl smile after losing her mom at the age of 12. Having to go through puberty with just your dad is pretty much the final nail in the coffin. You can imagine how the whole menstruation conversation went. Megan laughed at the mental image. You found a YouTube video to explain it, didn't you? Worse. I paid one of the assistants at my office to fill in the blanks. They both laughed, and a comfortable silence set in. Out on the lake, several boats puttered by in the warm sun gracing the early afternoon sky. She stole a glance at Mike, wondered if fate had dealt new cards for her to play with. She'd worked so hard at trying to make ends meet that life seemed to cruise by her at an alarming rate. Maybe this man was God's way of telling her that it was time to get back in the game. Mike seemed like a nice guy. Granted, he could be making up the stuff about his wife dying, but this all felt right. Say, Mike, Megan turned toward him. I don't do this sort of thing very often, but what do you say we drink a bunch of daiquiris until we giggle like our teenagers? He clapped his hands together. Megan, I think this could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. He waved at the bartender behind the counter. Enrique, bring us the best daiquiris you can make. Top shelf only, and this woman's money is no good here. Put them all on my tab. Yes, Mr. Chase, the bartender answered. Megan protested. You don't have to do that. It's quite all right. Besides, tomorrow night you can buy. He gave her a wink. Why do I suspect you won't let that happen? He laughed. After the first daiquiris were drained and the kids made occasional appearances, she discovered Mike was a lawyer, a partner in a law firm specializing in corporate law. Kelly, being an overachiever, served as the captain of the debate team and an accomplished oboist at the high school orchestra. The more they talked, the more they got along. Though the tequila helped, Megan found Mike easy to talk to. Close to dinner time, Kyle and Kelly returned. Kelly turned beet red at the sight of Megan and Mike having such a good time. Dad, what are you doing? Well, since you two hit it off, Megan and I just sat here getting drunk and planning our dual wedding. Mike said, you know, the four of us get married in a civil ceremony and live on a commune in North Dakota. Oh my God, she flashed an embarrassed grimace at Kyle. Parents are so embarrassing. Tell me about it, Kyle said. He gave Megan a wry smile. Hey, Dad, can they come join us for dinner? Please say yes, please. It'd be nice to have someone to talk to other than your old man, he laughed. Go ahead, keep talking, daughter. You're doing great. Her face reddened again. I mean, it might be nice for you to have another adult to talk to. Oh, I don't want to intrude, Megan said, even though part of her wanted to intrude and Mike to insist. It's really an imposition, and we have our own dinner reservations. Well, that's easy to fix if you're up for it. I'd love to have you over for dinner. Besides, Kelly is right. It would be nice. It would be so nice to have another adult to talk to. Did I fail to mention my collection of wine? No, you didn't. Well, I have this great... You had me at wine, Mike. We accept. Guess we're double dating, Megan chuckled. Kyle's widening eyes communicated pure horror to his mother. Good. Everything's settled then. Let's say 4, Kelly said. Yes, Mother, Mike said, laughing at his daughter. What about my reservations? I should cancel them. Megan had done enough waitressing to know how irritating unused reserved tables were. No problem. No problem. Mike motioned over to Enrique again, who stood close by as the daiquiris flowed. Please cancel Mrs. Johnston's reservation and have them set 2 extra places at our table. Yes, Mr. Chase, right away, sir. Enrique disappeared behind the bar. The waiter's strange formality when dealing with Mike struck her as odd. Exactly how often do you come here? Oh, I forgot to mention, I own a small portion of this resort. She stared at him in confusion for a moment. A small portion? He smiled back at her. Well, half anyway. Before dinner, Mike took them on a special tour of the inner workings of the resort to include the extensive wine cellar. Mike had a whole area dedicated to his personal collection, and although Megan was unfamiliar with most of the wines, the collection was nonetheless impressive. He admitted, though, most of the wine came from trading different bottles with friends, a hobby which was more fun than drinking the wine itself. As tasty as dinner was, Megan found the company even better. She suspected the dinner that had been prepared for them wasn't the same dinner being served to the rest of the resort guests. The table sat on a private loft overlooking the main dining room with a commanding view of Lake Oleander. The fine china they ate from was meant for special occasions and VIP visitors. Mike explained the china usually sat in a cabinet in the corner, unused by his business partner who preferred hot dogs and beer to actual human food. At the end of the night, Mike and Kelly walked them back to their room. While Kelly and Kyle said good night and made arrangements to hang out the next day, Mike and Megan stole a few moments to themselves. Tonight was pretty terrific, Mike said, taking Megan's hands. She bit her bottom lip. It had been a great evening, and she didn't want to screw it up by saying or doing something wrong. She couldn't remember a night as wonderful as this one. Me too. I'd invite you in for a nightcap, but that would be... I'd say yes, he said, flashing a charming smile. You know, we've been off the dating ride for quite some time. We should take it slow. Besides, I have no idea how Kelly might react to the idea of a nightcap. She's a teenager, and she could die of embarrassment. She smiled at him. Embarrassment is the leading killer of teens these days. Kyle would be a goner as well. That might be a compelling reason to do it. Think of the money we would save on food bills. She snorted at the thought. You're right, of course. Tell you what, tomorrow Let's say we do lunch, just the two of us. We can find something for the kids to do. It's funny how we refer to them as kids. Not really kids anymore, are they? Megan sighed. I suppose you're right. Mike leaned in and gave her a kiss on the cheek. It was pensive. It was a pensive kiss. He wanted to pull away and then surprised her by also kissing her on the lips. Gross, you two, Kelly shouted from down the hallway. Yeah, really, Kyle added. Just how much wine did you guys have to make you guys all smoochy-faced? Kyle added his 2 cents in the conversation. Both Kyle and Kelly devolved into fits of uncontrolled laughter. Megan leaned into Mike's shoulder and laughed. The kiss, albeit awkward, was warm, welcome, and comfortable. This was her moment, her time to take a chance. Well, kids, we just agreed to have lunch tomorrow. And if all goes well, we'll probably smooch again. Ew, gross, Kelly said. Both Kyle and Kelly continued their over-the-top laughter. Megan hardly slept that night. Every time she found herself nodding off, thoughts of Mike returned. So charming and so wonderfully vulnerable. The love he still carried for his late wife was very much still present. She'd have to tread carefully with a guy like that. Although Mike didn't say so, he was well off. Running a quick search for Mike Chase on the internet, several sites came up, most having to do with corporate law, several of them centered on philanthropic activities. Articles about his loving wife's death brought Megan to tears a few times. One article outlined a charity set up in her name, a wonderful woman married to an equally wonderful man. After breakfast the next morning, they made their way down to the docks. Megan chose a small boat with an outboard motor from the 20 available. The man in charge, calling himself Harbor Master Bill, gave them a quick tutorial and had her fill out a few forms. She listened as he gave her a well-rehearsed lecture about boater safety. In the distance, a thin line of clouds formed. Say, Bill, do you think the weather's going to hold out? Well, how long do you plan to be gone? Oh, just the morning. We have lunch scheduled for noon. He handed back her license and a copy of the paperwork. Well, we'll hold till then. You see anything that looks like trouble, just make your way back. The weather can turn nasty here. Doesn't seem like too much now, but Lake Oleander can be a bit of a bitch. Gets real ornery. Megan grimaced at the odd metaphor. Good advice, thanks. They climbed into the boat where Megan impressed Kyle with her boating skills, backing out of the small marina. Megan moved up to the bow and removed her t-shirt, exposing a bikini top while Kyle took the helm. The sun warmed her skin. For the first time in a long while, a sense of wholeness embraced her. No pressures from work, no worrying about Kyle, no obsessing about a long-since failed marriage or trying to figure out how to pay the next month's mortgage, and on top of it all, a date with the wonderful Mike Chase. With those thoughts, she drifted off to sleep. She woke with a start to the sound of Kyle yelling something. What's the matter, buddy? Sorry to wake you, but the engine died on us. Doesn't want to start. Let me have a look. Although not quite sure that she knew even the name of any part on the motor, blue smoke coming out of the top of the pole and the pull rope hanging uselessly on the motor's side probably wasn't right. It was like the motor and the rope were refusing to cooperate with each other. Harbor Master Bill's lecture hadn't included engine maintenance and repair. Well, I guess we row for a while. I'll get rolling and you keep working on the engine. I thought boys were supposed to be good at these things. Good at fixing these sorts of things. She glanced at her watch, which read 11:15. That was plenty of time to make their lunch date. If she rowed fast, they could get back with a few minutes to spare to clean up. Missing the lunch was not an option. She dropped the oars in the water with a splash and turned the boat around. Although sure they had drifted south of the resort, their exact location wasn't entirely clear. In the back of the boat, Kyle continued wrestling with the motor. He occasionally turned and gave her an odd smirk as she rowed. What, Kyle? You keep staring at me. I never realized what a cool mom I had. Here we are, out in the middle of the lake, stranded, and a little unclear on where we are, and you immediately think to jump on the oars and row. That's pretty cool. I bet the other kids don't have moms who'd think to do that. Thank you. I'm glad to know you think I'm a complete... let me try that again. I hate it when that happens. Thank you. I'm glad to know you don't think I'm a complete dork. Afraid of ruining the moment, she continued to roll. This is the exact thing she hoped to come out of this week. A moment which would always be uniquely theirs. A chance to connect with her son. Megan, I guess you did a pretty good job raising that kid of yours after all, she thought. A loud clap of thunder took her moment of reverie away. Before falling asleep, the clouds appeared like a pencil-thin suggestion of unpleasant weather on the horizon. Staring at them now, they didn't have anywhere near the time she thought they did. Not finding shelter soon meant they would be trapped out on a lake in a metal boat, a lightning magnet ensuring they'd attract any lightning in the area. The crack made her row even harder. The wind kicked up and bucked at the little craft as the waves grew exponentially from its previously placid demeanor. Rain started as droplets now came down in buckets as the wind drove it into them. Several inches of water accumulated on the bottom of the boat. Imagining the worst, her fear stoked an intense need to continue rowing. Digging the ends of the oars deep into the water, Megan propelled them as far across the lake with each stroke as possible. Her muscles screamed at every pull. "Mom!" Kyle clamored over the howling wind. "Do you want me to trade off with you?" With every stroke of the oars, Megan let out a puff of air. "No, thanks, Kyle. I can manage for now." "Okay, let me know when you want to trade off." Edging around a bend in the lake, Kyle pointed towards something in the distance and yelled, "Mom, I see the docks." Thank God. The bottom of the boat was now a soupy mess, with her t-shirt and several items from her purse floating in a jumbled mess. On the end of the dock, a man stood waving at them. She brushed water from her eyes, trying to identify the figure. Likely it was the harbor master waiting to give them a tongue lashing about being out in a rainstorm. She wanted to give him a piece of her mind about sending them out into the lake with faulty equipment, but right now she was more worried about getting out of this deluge. So that was chapter 4 and 5. Chapters 4 and 5. So we did 1 through 3 last week. We did 4 through 5 this week. So if there's a good response to this video, I'll go ahead and read a few more chapters next week. As long as we're all trapped in our house, why not? Anyway, you can find Riapoke. You can find my other books on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Apple, all over the place. These readings are going to be posted onto, I'll clean up the video a little bit and post them to YouTube, and I'll share the link around, so please feel free to share those. If you are planning to tune in next week, just give me a comment, and I'll plan for it. So anyway, everybody have a great weekend, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.